Now we are on. I'm gonna try and fit this all in one, but if I can't, I will split it up into two. That this is today's news video with Tegan Knox as a prominently featured person because Tegan Knox has returned to WWE. Tegan was one of the many people released due to budget cuts over the last 2 years since the pandemic, and is now back in the company. And I hope that Tegan is able to show off her potential this time around because she showed some of that potential down in NXT, but unfortunately, due to various injuries, was the victim of pretty much stop-start booking or a stop-start push because of the injuries. So she was really unable to get her feet under her on either the main roster or NXT. Even though she did get it a little bit more under NXT, she struggled to get it under her. She struggled to get her feet under her in the main roster. But either way, this past edition of SmackDown saw Liv Morgan be assisted by the returning Tegan Knox against Damage Control, and that means that more than likely we'll be seeing something happening in the not too distant future with Tegan Knox and maybe her former rival Dakota Kai. Speaking of this past edition of SmackDown, we saw the World Cup tournament come to a conclusion as Ricochet not only become the #1 contender for the Intercontinental Championship, but is the victor of the World Cup tournament. I know that a lot could be made that WWE didn't go the route of having an international star win, but they did have a lot more variety and a lot more international flavor in the match than they normally do. So the fact that they did not have the international flavor win, it isn't as prevalent because at least somebody like Ricochet won and not somebody like Braun Strowman. Even though I would like to wonder what it would have been like having Braun Strowman against Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship, but at least WWE did have the forethought to give a World's Championship, a title match to the winner of the tournament, because at least the winner of the tournament won something, and it wasn't just a tournament for nothing, because that wouldn't have made much sense, now would it? But speaking of a match for something, the Royal Rumble is coming up around in a little more than a month, and we have our first challenger for the Rumble match, or the first person to declare for the Rumble match, and that person is the Royal Rumble veteran and the man chasing down Kane for the most consecutive Royal Rumble matches, that being Kofi Kingston, as Kofi is the first person to declare for the Royal Rumble, and hopefully will show off just like he always does in the Royal Rumble match, leaving us gasping for air at the excitement and the craziness that we always see from Kofi Kingston in the Royal Rumble. Now we slide over to AEW, and I will mention, like I always do, that how much I wish that I could just break this video apart and focus and allow AEW Fight Forever to be the background for the AEW news, but I'm sure that time will come very, very soon. Hopefully that I will be able to do that instead of just focusing on WWE and having WWE be the background for even news that doesn't have to do with the company. But either way, there are some in AEW questioning the booking of Tony Khan because of the idea that he is allowing William Regal to walk out the door and, basically how prominently featured Regal has been since Full Gear, and that you're suddenly that you had the idea that Regal is going to be featured that prominently, and that you knew ahead of time that you would let him go. It's like you could have changed, like you knew what was going to happen at Full Gear, and the plan either way was going to be Bryan Danielson being one of MJF's first opponents, then did William Regal need to be featured in the role that he was featured in? Or could you have picked somebody else if you knew Regal was leaving? Either way, and you could have done it a little bit differently. I think everybody knows the answer, but I also don't think that anybody actually expected Tony Khan to allow William Regal to leave, which seems to be what might be happening. That it seems likely that Regal might actually be leaving and heading back to the WWE, which is dumbfounding in my opinion, but also not very surprising. But I would say it would have been more expected if Regal's contract was up and not that they were letting him leave. But that's just my opinion on the matter. Speaking of something that is just my opinion, Kota Ibushi. I gotta work on my segues. But Kota Ibushi has been on the shelf for the better part of the last year with nursing a shoulder injury, and it has kept him away from New Japan, and we may have seen the end of Kota Ibushi in New Japan because Kota Ibushi may not be returning to New Japan, as the problems between him and New Japan have been well documented over the last year, and those problems are what will keep Kota away from New Japan, because those problems don't seem to have gotten any better, and that tension doesn't seem to be alleviated at all. So the question is, when Kota is feeling 100%, will he return to Japan, or will he come stateside and be a free agent stateside? That's something yet that we don't have the answer to, but it will lead to a bunch of dream matches if Kota Ibushi is able to come stateside or decides to go stateside. It will lead to a bunch of dream matches that we will finally be able to see between Kota Ibushi and many, many talent, like maybe a Johnny Gargano or a Bryan Danielson. Speaking of AEW, though, or as we continue down the rabbit hole of AEW, as of right now, AEW is the reason why CM Punk is still under contract, as CM Punk is more than ready to move on from professional wrestling and to move on from AEW. But AEW is the one that is keeping him under contract. So the question is AEW keeping him under contract because they want to try and work things out? I guess that's something only AEW knows. But either way, I understand why AEW would want to work it out. But they got to understand that if it's not possible to work out, that it might be time to cut bait and let him go and let Punk move on. Two more bits of news before we head off, and that is Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega will not be fighting before Wrestle Kingdom 17 and will not be featured in a prominent fashion on AEW programming. I think it's because of the way that Ospreay is featured so prominently in New Japan and one of New Japan's top stars, that Tony Khan would not want to cross New Japan in that way, in not featuring one of his top stars or one of their top stars in a prominent way. And basically, he's letting New Japan take that match because he doesn't want to ruin the relationship, or possibly ruin the relationship, because of how he would book Will Ospreay. That's just my take on the matter. Speaking of something else, and that is that Roman Reigns apparently personally selected Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. He selected Sami because of how Sami has handled himself in what was supposed to be somewhat of a throwaway, temporary story with Sami and the Bloodline, and how Sami's gotten it over to the point of where Sami's gotten it over. But also he chose Kevin Owens because of Sami and Kevin's history between each other, and because of how long we've been looking at Tegan Nox celebrating. I think it's time that we wrap things up and not dig too deep into the post news. But what I will say is, you might be seeing a stream later today where I hop back on YouTube, because I was going to stream yesterday, but again, I was busy yesterday. So I didn't really have the opportunity to do much outside of what I was doing. So you might be seeing a stream later tonight where I hop back into TEW and share with you a new personal save that I have finally found my footing in TEW 2020. And you don't know how happy that makes me. So I'm excited to share it with y'all later tonight. But also, these have been my thoughts on the main ideas of professional wrestling, or the main bits of news in professional wrestling right now. Let me know your thoughts on this series and all things professional wrestling. Whether your thoughts on that, or if you're enjoying the series and me sharing bits of news with you, so you don't have to find the news. You just got to come right here for it. Let me know all that and more. But you can leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, because any and all interactions, or you could do one or all three, because any and all interactions are very much appreciated and do help with the algorithm. Maybe next time I'll actually have the outro well thought out and not where I am just talking word by word, and maybe where it makes a little bit more sense. But either way, these have been my thoughts on wrestling, and I can't wait to hear from you. But the next time you'll hear from me is in the next video. But before you go, do not forget to ding dong that notification bell to always know when a new video is up on the channel, and to see if I have a better outro next time. See you soon.